Project Hail Mary book review. Spoiler alert. Don't read this book review if you don't like spoilers. Disclaimer. This review is the reviewer's opinion and therefore is not a definitive understanding of the story. Date of review is September 15, 2025. Review of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, a comprehensive review by John Adams Thibert Jr. Review headline, a self-healing story of serendipitous discovery, the primary element. The idea of this story, the air element, is divided into the components hook and whirl. Hook. The hook involves a person waking up in a strange laboratory within a spaceship after a coma with only a robot caring for him. His crew members are dead and he is the only one left to help save the world. The hook is compelling because it gives the first scene a sense of desperation, isolation, and explanation. So you immediately sympathize with the main character. World. Some of the story's world happened on Earth, and much of it felt like a military story, based on aircraft carriers. The world of the story is mainly about outer space and the accurate depiction of it for realistic space travel. However, it uses a fantasy element of mysterious, super powerful bacteria that have several uses, such as propulsion and shielding. Also, the story makes use of the aspects of the world that are destructive as a means of solving problems in another aspect of the world, thus providing a lot of duality in the story, where a lot of things are both beneficial and destructive, therefore making the main character and his supporting characters look resourceful. The alien environment of this story happens a lot in the dark because the aliens don't have eyes. I was underwhelmed by the description of the dark alien world, primarily corridors for the main character to walk in. In this world, the spider alien, which did not have computers, somehow had a robot helping it build things. This conundrum was not addressed. However, the conundrum of an unlikely meeting between two civilizations striving to accomplish the same goal for their species, meeting in the same place in time and space, was thoroughly addressed. Stars for the hook, the wind element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Stars for the world, the cloud element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the idea, hook and world, 0.45 stars out of 0.5. The plot of the story, the fire element, is divided into the components conflict and climax. Conflict. The conflict of the story seems to be from a force of nature that is an extraterrestrial life form capable of devouring light coming from the sun before it can reach the earth, which would eventually cause all life that requires light from the sun on the earth to die. This plot is similar to, but not significantly identical to, the plot of Planetoid, the Chronicles of Relic Voth. The concept of mishandling of the main character could have been part of a side plot because of the swift and chaotic nature of his confiscation, but it did not seem to be the case. Something missing from the conflict is that the stellar microbes do not seem to have a direct defense mechanism when attacked and cannot infect people. Climax. The story's climax involves a last-minute decision to do several daring things to get the necessary amoebas to Earth and the spider alien's world. Eventually, the main character decides that since the spider alien cannot return to their own world, he needs to send the information and the space amoebas to Earth separately and help the spider alien get to his world to save it. He eventually ends up teaching a class in this spider alien world that involves him using a keyboard to talk to the spider alien children. The climax seems to tie everything together and resolve the main and sub-conflicts nicely. Stars for the conflict, the smoke element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for the climax, the lava element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the plot, conflict, and climax, 0.45 stars out of 0.5. The characters of the story, the water element, are divided into the components development and dimension. Development. The main character is being developed through his memory of who he is and his interaction with his spaceship environment with a sentient robot. The main character in the middle of the story begins to develop a relationship with a spider alien creature from a super Earth planet that can breathe ammonia at 29 times Earth's atmosphere. The background enables the relationship that the main character has in teaching high school physics because of the initial state of not knowing the language of the alien spider. Eventually, they work out the translation by using props provided by the alien spider and technology provided by the main character, such as laptops and computers. The relationship between the main character and the spider alien increases over time because the main character or the spider alien repeatedly does self-sacrificial things to save one another and one another's planets. Dimensions. So far, up to Chapter 5, the character has been okay with everything taking place, regardless of its legality, and has been assisting emphatically. Halfway through the book so far, the main character has been instrumental in solving the main problems of the story and alluding to potentially discovering the leading solution to the story's central conflict. The character reveals annoyance at having to save humanity. Instead of studying the spider alien biology more, the main character determined that he initially refused to go on the mission and was forced to go on it with amnesia and coma drugs, so that when he woke up after his coma, he would perform the mission and then think that he had volunteered. The main character admits that it was correct for one of the supporting characters, Strat, to force him to go on a mission, and that he was wrong to believe he would jeopardize the mission after being stranded in deep space. This gives the character the quality of an unwilling hero, which immunizes him against egotism and makes the character's flaw of cowardice into a shared communal instinct with him, as well as all humanity and all of the spider aliens, therefore metamorphic, transforming his usually negative instinct of cowardice into a superpower of a drive to save everyone. This point of insulating the main character's character flaw from its negative connotation and developing it into a strength is also reflected in the novel The Dragon Stratagem Soul Blaster. Stars for development, the ice element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Stars for dimensions, the steam element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the characters, development and dimension, 0.5 stars out of 0.5. So, the setting of the story, the earth element, is divided into the components of scenes and senses. Senses. The main character had a sensory experience of the flavor of a tube of space food. Also, he described the experience of various medical attachments to his person. I noticed a lack of sensory explanation, such that it may be that the author is using the literary technique. It doesn't need to be explained if you can already imagine what it is like. It also seems that because of the lack of description of putting on spacesuits on desiccated corpses, it shouldn't be described if we can imagine it ourselves. The scenes were described in a minimal and utilitarian manner so that they were barely understandable and made a vague image in the mind, such as many of the vague imagery described, like dark silhouettes of a spaceship. Scenes. The scenes are hastily constructed and rely heavily upon a prior understanding of the basic concepts related to the scenes, such as aircraft carriers, laboratories, and the interior of spaceships. Scenes involving the alien spider are more elaborately explained than ordinary scenes that could be familiar to a person, but their design and aesthetic are still underwhelming. There was a lot of description of harsh smells, such as ammonia, and a general description of different kinds of foods for space purposes, as well as several types of space gum. However, the senses were underwhelming and could have been more descriptive and involved, not just in the expected senses, but some that might have been unexpected. Stars for scenes, the rock element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for senses, the soil element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the setting, scenes and senses, 0.4 stars out of 0.5. The theme of the story, the spirit element, is divided into the components of lesson and epiphany. Lesson. In the story, the main character communicates with an alien entity in a spaceship in deep space, 12 light years from Earth. They work out various mechanisms through which they communicate, primarily nonverbal. This shows that communication is key to adaptation and coordination for a joint purpose. Halfway through the story, the main character determines and elaborates on the mechanism through which the spider alien life system functions. A lesson on how far or to what extent a person in charge of saving the world would go to force someone to do something they didn't want to do, and they knew they were the one who could save the world. It is shocking and bewildering, but a very reasonable and understandable decision to make, that someone could be forced to do something they didn't want to do if they could ultimately save the world. Another lesson the story teaches is that when the crisis level reaches a scale that could bring unthinkable consequences, self-sacrifice can be amplified to epic importance. Epiphany? The story is that a single-celled organism that can live on the sun and migrates to planets for elements that cannot be found on the sun could be the origin of all life spread throughout the universe. Another epiphany in the story is that certain innate human instincts drive behavior towards the goal. of the whole human species' survival under extreme circumstances. They can be accessed using special scenarios, such as when a person is given amnesia and a coma and wakes up understanding their mission to save humanity. Afterwards, when they're done, humanity finds out that it was not their initial intent, but to save themselves. An epiphany is that if someone is willing to sacrifice your life several times over again to save the life of an alien being who is also trying to save their civilization, that they ultimately end up having an ordinary seeming life, which was one of the things that they were determined to want, but also that they were determined to want more during harsh criticism. Serendipity seems to be an epiphany as well. Throughout the story, where solutions to problems come in the form of problems such that there is a duality of pairing problem couples. For example, when the main character accidentally contaminates their biological fuel later on, it is determined that the contaminant amoeba could be a source of food, solving his food problem with the contaminated fuel problem. Stars for the lesson, the ghost element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Stars for epiphany, the ether element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the theme, lesson and epiphany, 0.5 stars out of 0.5. Subtotal stars for the primary elements, 2.3 out of 2.5. Round up for primary elements, total stars 3 out of 3. Who wins? The secondary elements. The style of the story, the metal element, is divided into the components logic and pacing. Logic. The story uses a gradual awareness of the abilities of the previously comatose person, utilizing skills as they are discovered to figure out where he is. In the story, it is mentioned that the main character's memory is like looking at an old damaged photo. Yet, he can get a narration about watching TV and the program he was watching out of his memory, and information that is impossible to get from a single photo, such as that he has kids and is a teacher. Yet, the photo shows no evidence of having kids, which he uses to surmise that he is divorced. The main character mentions the importance of the temperature of the microbes, and I am waiting for this to pay off. The main character presumes that their hypothesis that water is not a critical component of all life is wrong, because they investigate the strange life that lived on the surface of the sun, which happens to contain water. This is logically inconsistent with the sample size that scientists use to determine probability, since the sample size of the different types of life, based upon different environments on different worlds, is only 3 in the story. The scientist is not using the scientific method of a sample size that is high enough to determine the probability that no other life could exist without water. The story emphasizes the need to travel to a faraway 12 light-year star system because that star system was not being affected by the microbes that eat stars. Yet a vital part of the life cycle of the microbes was the presence of a planet covered by carbon dioxide, in the case of the sun, Venus, which could have been easily determined with space telescopes without having to travel to the star system. Later on in the story, when the trip had already been accomplished to the star system, 12 light-years away, the introspective thought that there might not be a Venus-like planet as its source of carbon dioxide came to the forefront of thought. But this would have been way too late for that thought to justify the trillions of dollars of expense already spent on a mission that could have been avoided if it were known there were no Venus-like planets there. Math-wise, the optimum speed of light to go to the star system 12 light-years away from Earth would be 70.7%. Because this percentage of the speed of light has the reciprocal, which is identical to the time dilation, this would make an optimal percentage of the speed of light to travel at a minimum amount of time for the Earth to receive its vital survival information from a star 12 light-years away that needed to be traveled to through conventional acceleration means. Since the ship is referenced at 1.5 times the gravitational force of the Earth's deceleration, the total one-way trip acceleration time would be 1.5 years, and the total coasting time at 70.7% of the speed of light for 21.8 years at 1.414 time dilation and 2.24 years of the time dilation at an average of half of 70.7%. The speed of light making the minimum round trip for the information to get back to the Earth for this mission to be 46 years round trip from the point of view of the Earth. Since tiny computer hard drive spaceships are to send the information back to the Earth, utilizing a similar speed dynamic if you include 3 months of research before he can send back the information. It is in Chapter 6 that I have determined that if the rest of the text contradicts this, I will note that here, but it is interesting that 1.5 G forces are reasonable for this trip. In about the halfway point of the story, the driving character Strat states that the round trip would be 26 years, which does not include relativistic effects, which therefore makes it wrong by 20 years. Therefore, their timeline would be way off, and they would not be able to stop the extinction if they predict that half of the planet's population will be extinct in 19 or 27 years due to methane from Antarctica. Later in the story, it is explained that the Beetle spaceships can attain 93% of the speed of light at military-grade acceleration, which I approximated to 30 G-forces. This would add 11 years to the round trip, making the total round trip 57 years due to the additional time dilation at such a high percentage of the speed of light. The story insists on its calculations for time dilation. Still, its narrative deviates from this by saying that by the time the main character gets back to Earth, the people he used to know will be a generation older than him, implying relativistic time, which does not support the narrative that there was barely any relativistic time. However, the story does have simple solutions built into the plot and the narrative that have not been addressed to this logical issue. The stellar microbes somehow absorb neutrinos, and at the same time, there's a problem with time dilation, because this is a story where the plot is time-sensitive. Those two problems could actually be combined, as the story often does combine a problem with another problem. It's a serendipitous solution to both problems, in that since the space microbes are absorbing neutrinos, they must be warping space and time, and therefore, if you coat your ship with these microbes, then you wouldn't need to worry about the effects of time dilation at near-luminal speeds. Thus, the time-sensitive nature of the plot could be addressed. But this wouldn't be exactly Star Trek-level technology, where you could go faster than light, but at least you wouldn't suffer from the compounding effects of time dilation at very near-luminal speeds on the round-trip time. Also, the subplot of the spider alien civilization not knowing about time dilation and relativity would be a moot point if they coated their ship with the solar microbes, because then they would get the accidental warp drive also, which it appears they did from the description of their spacecraft, at least in the engine compartment. Pacing. The story has an adequate pacing of humor scattered throughout, mostly dry humor, with a scientist with unconventional and global authoritative power, wielding that power in humorous ways. In the transitions between scenes, which involve either the waking scenes where the character is in the moment that he is alone with an alien spider in deep space 12 years from Earth, or the scenes where he is remembering what happened before he got there to overcome his forgetfulness from his coma. These transitions are abrupt. Still, the amount of time spent in each scene tight seems balanced. The solution to the problem of the stellar bacteria is discovered about 2/3 of the way through the story, which means the remainder of the story would be the implementation of the solution. Stars for the logic, the gold element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for pacing, the iron element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the style, logic and pacing, 0.4 stars out of 0.5. The substance of the story, the calcium element, is divided into the components skeleton and teeth. Skeleton, the story is riddled with flashbacks that are basically memories of the main character, Dr. Grace, as he unravels what had happened to him before he was able to wake up stranded on a spaceship light years from Earth. The main character goes from being alone in space with 2 crewmates dead and desecrated from decomposition to being with an alien spider in a bubble in his spaceship. The story's structure is held together by the story's problem, presenting unique solutions, because every time a problem occurs, the solution is always the initial cause of the original large-scale problem. These microbes have infested the sun. Some of the relationships between the spider aliens and the main character involve the main character indulging in the spider alien's cultural tradition of watching someone sleep. However, the spider alien does not want to be watched eating, yet the spider alien is observed eating after insistence from the main character. Then, after eating, the spider alien immediately falls asleep. This would suggest that the spider aliens are not being watched to eat, but are sleeping directly after eating, and then being watched sleeping is not congruent. The main character observes that he didn't notice any time that the spider alien's culture and his culture clash. However, the aliens' cultural tradition is that they watch each other sleep and do not watch each other eat. And people's cultural tradition is that we watch each other eat and do not watch each other sleep. This is a direct clash. As the story keeps bouncing back and forth between Earth and the star 12 light years from Earth, it becomes less and less apparent as to why the flashbacks are occurring, and they don't appear to be a part of the waking up sequence of the main character from a coma that they were initially a part of. Teeth. The controversial aspect of the story is when the FBI commandeers the main character to assist in a science program meant to help confirm extraterrestrial life. This is a good example of teeth because it flies in the face of criticism for my story, Einstein's Conveyor Belt, where I explain that Congress can label someone as a national treasure by a secret vote and then ask them for their assistance. And if they do not give it, then take it by force to prevent a worldwide catastrophe of extinction-level proportions. The explanation of how the FBI commandeered the main character sounds like they had no interest in verbal interaction. At least in Einstein's Conveyor Belt, some congressman and a senator came along to explain why the U.S. Marshals had to commandeer the scientist. Stars for the skeleton, the bone element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for the teeth, the enamel element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the substance, skeleton and teeth, 0.4 stars out of 0.5. The grammar of the story, the wood element, is divided into the components, sentence structure, and word usage. Sentence structure. The sentence structure is not distracting, although various dialects affect the length and word choice within the sentence. It effectively conveys the basic information about the narrative and the story's premise. Word usage. The word jag was used to refer to a fit of crying, presumably from artistic license or contemporary usage. The word flotsam was used to describe a place where a jumpsuit might be. I guess it works for a place where in 0G things are floating around. The word winnowing describes the selection process for those going on the Hail Mary Voyage project. By the definition of winnowing, this is a seemingly creative license usage. The word scads was used to describe a large number of solar microbes. Based on the definition, this is accurate usage. The story features the technical biological jargon, monostomate. But this term is incorrect for an organism that eats and defecates from the same orifice. The words bandolier and underlayment are used, which have to do with a strap, in the first case, in a type of armor-like material, as stars for the sentence structure. The timber element, a 0.2, 5 stars out of 0.25. Stars for word usage. The lumber element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for grammar, sentence structure, and word usage, 0.45 stars out of 0.5. The essence of the story, the soul element, is divided into the components emotion and memory. Emotion. The main character gets emotional over the loss of his crewmates. I would not feel sorrow right away if I just discovered my loved ones were dead. I would panic and the room would spin. I would hyperventilate and start to experience denial before sorrow by saying no, over and over again. And then the sorrow would be wrenching. I would be crawling on the floor, dealing with it. And then it would turn to anger because someone has to be to blame without anyone to blame. I would start hurting myself until I couldn't take the pain anymore because I would blame myself. And then the cycle would repeat and die down over a long period of time, and perhaps varying levels of modulation. The main character is elated to tears when he finds out that the alien spider can provide him with 2 million kilograms of the solar fuel microbes so he can return home. Memory. The main character can remember his life as though he's watching a video and can start and stop it at will. This is not my experience of memory. It works like a blurry, fuzzy, dark, abstract image representing the ideas I'm trying to recall. It turns out that towards the end of the story, the main character finds out that he did not willingly go on the mission, but was forced to go and was given amnesia drugs and coma drugs, so that when he woke up, he would do the mission. This is because the main character found out that he actually was terrified to go and was, unfortunately, the only person who could fill the position that had been vacated by 2 astronauts who had accidentally died. Stars for the emotion, the ectoplasm element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for memory, the brain element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the essence, the emotion, and memory, 0.4 stars out of 0.5. The impression of the story, the sand element, is divided into the components opinion and talent. Opinion. I think the story is entertaining because in several instances I would laugh at parts of it because of the extreme scenarios and the often dry humor. The story is pretty fleshed out in terms of its theme discovery. However, the methodologies and their implementation, such as the timelines and flow charts, could be more polished. Talent. The author seems to be talented in making a story that causes you to overlook certain questionable physics mumbo-jumbo because of the dramatic scenarios that result. And you are rooting for the story to be successful, so you hope that these physical problems with the reasoning can be worked out and addressed after reading. Stars for the opinion, the glass element, 0.2 stars out of 0.25. Stars for talent, the ceramic element, 0.25 stars out of 0.25. Total stars for the impression, opinion, and talent, 0.45 stars out of 0.5. Subtotal stars for the secondary elements, 2.05 out of 2.5. Round down. For secondary elements, total stars, 2 out of 2. Spoiler alert, don't read this book review if you don't like spoilers. Disclaimer. This review is the reviewer's opinion and therefore is not a definitive understanding of the story. Summary. A man finds himself waking up after being in an induced coma on an abandoned spaceship in deep space. Eventually, he will work out why he is there and get to work on that project. Is there a way to save humanity from bacteria infecting the sun and other stars? He's there to find a solution. And eventually, he comes across another spaceship from a different civilization who is also there for the same reason. They are both soul survivors. He named the spider alien that he met on the other spaceship Rocky. Rocky is a phenomenal engineer who can craft anything needed out of a nearly indestructible material, and the main character is a very well-rounded scientist. Eventually, they work together to solve their problems and say goodbye. Still, at the last minute, the main character has to go back and save the spider alien because his science determines that the spider alien has a significant issue with his spacecraft. There is a secondary method to sending help to the Earth, so eventually the main character ends up saving the spider alien Earth in the spider alien's world and ends up living on the spider alien's world. The problem in the story a lot of times became a solution to other problems in the story, which I noticed is part of the theme that resourcefulness is about finding and connecting the dots between problems and other problems, such that they cancel each other out by turning into a solution for one another. In fact, the story has some accidental problems that solve other problems, as was mentioned in the logic section, that the problem of these stellar microbes storing neutrinos could also be a solution to the problem of the time sensitivity of this mission and the compounding effects of time dilation, because the storing of neutrinos would be most reasonable to be done using warped space. And this could also be a means through which the time dilation conundrum could be solved, and because the spaceships are coated in these bacteria as shielding, which are warping space, therefore inadvertently preventing time dilation by an accidental warp drive surrounding the ship in the process, filling in a plot hole that was kind of awkwardly addressed and not really filled in during the story. Pros and cons. Hook, climax, development, dimension, lesson, epiphany, sentence, structure, and talent. Cons, world, conflict, scenes, senses, logic, pacing, skeleton teeth, word usage, emotion, memory, and opinion. Conclusion. The story has a lot going for it in terms of thematic content, and it could be ironed out better in terms of the methodology in which it was employed. The characters seem to have depth and consistency in their decisions and are somewhat sympathetic, even in extreme scenarios where they make decisions that make most people cringe. The main character's arc was clearly laid out and well implemented, so the decisions along the way seem to drive the character towards improving his characteristics at the end. The story has what I term a self-healing nature to its plot holes. If you use the same technique, called serendipity, that the author used and apply it to the existing plot holes, there seem to be problems that match up with other issues that form a couple that can complement each other through mutual solution. The story gets 5 stars, but it is within the 1.0 star cushion point built into the 10-element book review system. According to the star cushion, 54.3, 50.65 star. Net total stars grade for the story primary elements is 2.3 and secondary elements 2.05. Star grade 4.3, 5 out of 5.0. Number star grade 87%. Letter star grade B plus Y. Grand total star rating for the story primary elements 3 and secondary elements 2. Star rating 5 out of 5.